Give it up for Mr. Steve Huber.
Yeah. Still not set up right. So again, so hopefully I won't bore anybody who was at the previous talk or has just followed me on whatever it's called, SlideShare, whatever, by again talking about design for every screen, which they insisted I talk about. So I was going to talk about what I'm actually doing today at Cummins, give you kind of a case study to do the specifics, because that's always my complaint about my general philosophical discussions. Oh, except that corporate and legal shut it down like 2 days ago. So I pulled one slide out of this thing and thought I'd talk, if I can't talk about specific projects I'm working on, is everything I'm working on is secret, always. I'll talk about a specific facet of stuff, which probably meets our timeline really well. Anyway, this is kind of typical of a diagram I might encounter when coming to revise a project, or the baseline experience you get out of at least some features. You build a page or function or whatever for users to compose messages to their friends and cohorts and share whatever it is that you're trying to share for people. But at least on mobile, it's almost always the wrong way to do that. If you need to allow customers to share things by SMS or send an email or get driving directions or look for the local amenities near the hotel or anything like that, you can just add a button. You don't build a voice application when you want them to call you. You just add a link to the dialer, of course. Now, of course, yes, there's a little more than adding a button to it and stuff, and you have to conceive it right, but fundamentally, right thing. Now, a lot of you might think this is obvious. If you've never encountered it, you can ignore me and go back to reading your email or something like that. But I've had this come up like a dozen times in the last 18 months. It seems to be an inherent problem in kind of the way that we think about design again. So for getting back to the process of design that the last several speakers have talked about working together, about thinking about not just maybe mobile first, but everything as an ecosystem. So this board, and I don't think that's your hands, but you're in this room, exemplifies kind of the issue that we get. What I say is kind of the web made all of our design processes and requirement gathering processes and all that stuff a little bit lazy. You probably all, or many of you at least, have been inside, say, requirement gathering sessions or estimation sessions. Somebody has thrown out a list of features, and now it's time to estimate how hard it's going to be to build. And the estimation process is a feature equals a page. And then that usually keeps going. Probably a lot of you have done it. I see a few people nodding. I've done that when I'm not paying attention, or in the old days before I learned better. Yet you just go, okay, well, we'll draw a rectangle on the mean feature, and then we start filling in with stuff, and then somehow then 2 months later it's actually built and out there. And this is hard to read. But we need to stop doing that. So this doesn't just limit the development of interesting interactions. It means you blindly build out, that page for each feature. So I get around this with the title of my talk. So I actually worked my way back to that, didn't I? What I like to call design for every screen. I've seen a couple people twittering even about the thing, about the mobile first versus something else. It doesn't seem to be a single term. I dreamed up this one, but I'm not good at making up buzz phrases, so probably nobody uses it. So my concept is all about, I have to scroll to it, thinking about the entire experience as one. Understand the problem, the business, the goals, the users. Don't take any assumptions about what the business tells you they want. They tell you they want an iPhone app, we'll think about it. What's your problem statement? And like some of the other conversations I've been having or seeing during this thing about, or the assumptions, we'll build, of course you'll build an iPhone app. Everybody needs to have that if you have a business. Well, maybe, but what if my app is only going out to Egyptian customers? Well, then I'm going to need only Symbian and support dumb phones and probably SMS support. You can't make any assumptions unless you know about your customer base. And if you're talking about global reach, you really can't make any assumptions based on the people you work with and what you know. Design the whole process. It's another thing I say. This is often hard to do because you're on the mobile team or you're contracted as an agency to be only do the little mobile design part. But it's still worth kind of sketching out concepts and bugging them and getting to the core of the business process. Sometimes the answer to the problem is a better piece of paper for the call center, or changing the order of the way things come out of the cardboard box. And it doesn't necessarily building a new technical system. And then the design process itself, which I'm not going to show you today, but you can look it up. I got several slideshows about that, is design not for any one system. I can't remember anybody's name, but a few people have talked to this already today, that you don't, if you design for, say, the web first and then go, oh, okay, we'll turn the web into an app, you're going to end up with a webby app that doesn't very app-like. If you do the same thing for anything else, you design an iPhone app, and I spend a lot of my days fixing this stuff, you end up, the Android app ends up looking like an iPhone app, and it confuses users. We go out in the field, we watch users use it, try to employ it, and it's a shiny, pretty thing that gives them satisfaction when they first look at it, but they can't navigate it. It's as easy as look at the bar on the bottom versus press the menu button, but they're still frustrated, and I think you all, especially any of you in money-making enterprises, where you actually have to sell your apps, know they're not using them anyway after 18 months. You have to do whatever you can. If they are annoyed for a moment at the beginning, they're not going to use it at all. Whether it's corporate or money-making stuff, you can't live with that kind of problem, so you have to build it the right way. And then process-wise. Once you design the entire experience around the thing all at once, not worrying about the specific platforms. You think experientially in business process and data processing, building in services and stuff, then you branch it for each task. And so forth, which I can talk about the process more if I'm actually ahead of schedule, which I seem like I might be. So I keep talking about apps instead. And when you think about weird like linkages from app to some other app, a lot of people ask me, well, okay, so how do we do it on the web? Well, easy. I think probably everybody knows that your browser will or your SMS tool or whatever will auto-detect a phone number. Well, you shouldn't rely on that, though. There's a little code that says, make this a phone number. Really important if you're going to do international phone numbers, or if your phone number has got a cool little acronym, 1-800-CALL-ME or something. Well, it's not going to detect that the right way, usually. So you need to tell it what it is. It's the normal href versus label thing. And there are things like this for all of these services. You cannot, again, this is one of those, probably some of you are nodding going, of course, who doesn't know this? A huge number of people don't know this. I regularly go to meetings with developers go, how do you, what? That's real thing? Very simple thing. You want to send an SMS link, email, of course, or even Google Maps. Google Maps is a little bit hacky, tricky. If you're going to use this, you go, oh, we can just link to Google Maps. The formatting of the URI is very specific. There's several versions. If you just go type in your browser on the desktop a search and paste it on there, it may or may not be the right one. So search a little bit and experiment. It'll be fine. Now, the one I mentioned was the email link. Probably only you have seen that. But you don't use it except maybe under duress or for your home website where you don't bother building a form, because it's clearly a worst practice. You don't just link to the stupid email app, because that's lame, right? Yes, on desktop, that's lame and stupid. But it's all about what the device, the particular device in context knows about you. On desktops, the email app has no idea what you were just doing on the web, doesn't know very much about you, it doesn't know where you are, doesn't remember any of that stuff. And therefore, mostly, the expectation has become you will do it all contextually inside the browser. So it even looks dumb. Users will click the link, see it starts launching the email app, because of course it is never linked to the email you're actually using. It always launches some random app that came with your computer. And then they get annoyed by it. On mobile, it's exactly the opposite, which is kind of weird, because most things I talk about in the mobile space are kind of extensions of it. The principles apply universally. Mobile, at least for these, it's almost exactly opposite, like I already said. That the email app is, or whatever, is integrated into your whole process. So it knows a lot more about you. And over time, customers become accustomed to this switch in experiences. So, like I said, we actually threw some apps out in the wild. So I've seen this a lot in the past, but fresh data is always good to make sure everything is good. So recently we did this again, and people do things like ask, okay, so how do I get to my read aloud turn-by-turn directions? Well, you can't, because we built in a turn-by-turn direction tool, and it does what we made the tool do and nothing else. So if you had a preferred tool, if you don't want to use Google turn-by-turn, you paid for Telenav and it's plugged into your car, tough. Unless, of course, we were clever enough to remember that we probably should have linked to that tool instead and saved ourselves several thousand hours of development. Overall, remember, best practices vary between platforms. Right now, I'm pretty comfortable saying this. For all mobile is like this, all desktops like that. There are blurry lines already. In the future, who knows, so keep paying attention. Okay, the biggest pushback I get for trying to do this kind of diagramming, it's not just link SMS and email and phone and driving directions outside, but anything like that where I look at the business process and try to get them to change their concept of it. I'm not removing functionality, I'm just changing their assumptions about how I'm going to meet the functionality. Is things like, oh my God, it'll make users leave the process. They basically over-apply all those pithy marketing phrases like 3 clicks and they're gone. And that's the only one I can remember because somebody said that to me last week. But there's all kinds of little phrases like this that get misapplied or over-applied. Your tool probably doesn't have that. A lot of those little phrases they're like people can only remember 7 numbers. They're misunderstood. They're only for specific markets. But they also don't apply necessarily to mobile stuff. You can switch contexts. You can get back. It's not a problem here. This chart, by the way, is actually about desktop users. This is a specific study somebody did of desktop users being interrupted. So that mantra that Josh actually started out with about, mobile users aren't always on the go and interrupted all the time. Well, not a lot. Not all the time, sometimes they are, but everybody gets interrupted. So you need to design every context. Desktops with their multi-windowing scheme and just the way that we give it focus make it a little easier to come back, to remember and come back to things. On mobile, you might say, okay, it's single screen, so they're going to jump out to some other task and they're going to forget you. But in practice, they don't. They come back. They switch tasks, not willy-nilly, but switch back and forth between tasks at ridiculous rates. These are not all working together, but some of the figures you can go look up places. When you get down to the thing about where people are putting their eyeballs when they, like the earlier talks about research thing, when you get the eye tracker on people and watch what they're actually doing out in the field, they're switching their gaze every few seconds, even if just kind of sitting there. Looking at the phone, doing kind of a single task. Okay, and I'm not at my bus stop yet, or oh, what's on TV? All of that. What was that? 85% of people watch TV now with a mobile handset or a tablet or something in their hands, doing something else at the same time. They switch tasks, but they won't lose you. They'll come back if there's a reason to complete the task. This gets back to why we need to delight them, make useful, nice tasks, and make useful, nice apps that they want to continue using. Just some closing numbers basically about how you have to design with the mobile in mind. And you have to support all these interfaces and you have to support them uniquely to the mobile device. In the US, 25% of people, these are slightly different numbers than other people said, but 25% of people who browse the web at all do it on a mobile device exclusively, plus or minus. Maybe they go to the library once a month for all I know. But there's no backup desktop. They don't just do it by choice. They're only doing their mobile experience they're only doing their internet experience through a mobile handset. There's no fallbacks. You can't assume that they'll use some other system. I'm going to scoot past this to make sure that I get the last point, which is, except that I could be wrong about your project. I spend all day, arguing this stuff, and then I go home at night and I work on one of the other projects, which is a startup, a social, local related startup, and then I draw maps that all have driving directions and stuff in them because it's so related to location-based service that it is required to be integrated. So none of these rules are hard and fast. They're guidelines, they're principles, but it's not a law. So at 30 seconds to go, I think I'll let us leave for lunch a little bit earlier, actually. instead of yammering more. Done.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thank you.